Bienvenidos a todos y a todas a este nuevo seminario del CIO. Este seminario está patrocinado por el proyecto PROMETEO y hoy tenemos la suerte de contar con la profesora Magdalena Kapelko del Departamento de Logística de la Universidad de Economía y Empresa de Ella ya nos ha visitado muchas veces aquí en el CIO, colabora y ha colaborado con varios profesores de aquí del CIO. Su investigación se centra en la medición de la eficiencia y en la productividad, haciendo uso de técnicas fronteras no paramétricas. Y hoy ella nos va a hablar sobre la ineficiencia en los tribunales de justicia polacos. Habla muy bien español, pero se siente mucho más cómoda haciendo la presentación en inglés, pero luego las preguntas las podemos realizar en español. Sí, tenemos preguntas. Venga, pues adelante.
Muchas gracias, Lidia, por la presentación y muchas gracias a todo el CIO por la invitación aquí, sobre todo a Juan Aparicio, que no está con nosotros, pero tal vez luego lo mirará. Pues muchas gracias, Juan, por invitarme aquí otra vez. Bueno, estoy siempre muy contenta aquí, especialmente en esta temporada, ¿no? Porque yo ayer he salido de mi casa en Polonia, con los gorros, bufandas, guantes, hacía bajo cero, -1, sin nieve, pero ya blanco por las temperaturas, y al llegar aquí, parece el tiempo todavía de la playa, ¿no? Al menos en la recepción del hotel me dijeron, sí, cómprate aquí el bañador, te da tiempo bañarte en la piscina. Ok, pues eso siempre se agradece, ¿no? Además, sobre todo el ambiente aquí de la investigación, de poder colaborar con la gente, ¿no? Pero este valor añadido del tiempo es algo que se verdad muy agradece. Bueno, y como dijo Lidia, para presentar el paper sí que lo haré en inglés, especialmente que el tema tiene un vocabulario bastante específico de la justicia, etc. Pues entonces que voy a cambiar el idioma. So the paper, this paper I'm presenting is my individual paper. It's about the measurement of inefficiency of courts of justice of Polish district courts in the input and output specific inefficiency framework. Why such subject? No, so this subject of courts efficiency is connected with cost action, where I'm participating, where I'm on a management committee of this cost action. It's possible that you are not familiar with cost action because they are not so popular, but it's very interesting initiative of European Union. Here the idea is to create networks of researchers interested in one subject. It's also very competitive to get such project, but the idea here is only to finance the networking activities. No? So cost action is not really giving the money for research itself. It's only giving the money for networking. So in general, such networks begins as a small network of few people, and then during the 4 years of existence, it is increasing because you can enter in such cost action practically all the time during this 4 years. So if you are not familiar, it also might be very interesting for you to look into cost action. Of course, it has official websites. You can find all the actions which are ongoing, where you can still enter, etc. But it's true that in social science, in business, there are very, very few actions, but they are some. So it's always a nice opportunity to enter. So this cost action is where I'm in is under the title Efficient Justice for All, Improving Court Efficiency through EU Benchmarking. So this cost action, as I told you, the cost action are not really providing the money for research. It's mostly for networking activities. So in general, the cost action, you also need some money for research. So mostly the cost action, you accompany them with some national projects. So the subject of court efficiency, I also included in my national Polish project of National Science Center under the title Investigations into Efficiency and Productivity Change of Decision-Making Units, New Methods Based on Machine Learning Techniques and Empirical Applications. So So the court efficiency is one of the themes of this action. As you can see with these pictures, it's only one of the themes because there are in total 3 themes of this project. The main theme is machine learning and efficiency, what I am doing thanks to collaboration here with CIO, of course with Juan. We are also making one paper with Juan Francisco, with Jose Luis Sofio, and of course with doctoral students. We published one paper with Maya Guillen. Now we have one paper also with Victor Espana. So this is the main theme. Then there is this court efficiency, and there is also a third subject which is connected with broadly defined sustainable finance. But basically, what we are doing here is we work with portfolio efficiency, including sustainability criteria, because of course efficiency is also applied in the context of portfolios optimization, etc. So more like funds. So as you can see, this project is extremely broad, but this is now I even see that it's too broad. But in general, in Poland now we have a very tough situation with the money for financing. Because what we are investing in Poland is we are investing in the army, which is not surprising, because we have the war at our frontier, war in Ukraine. So most of financial efforts of Poland are now to creating the army. So really, the money for research are not increasing how they should be because of connected with inflation, etc. Well, the new government, they increased a little bit of the money for research, but really not so much to compensate for all the decreasing which was happening in the last years. So actually this is the only option to get some project, because it could be really 3 projects out of it, but because there are so few money on the market in Poland for research, I needed to put it into one project. Really the success rate in such projects is like 7%, 7 up to 10%. So it's very hard to get them because the money are very limited. So this is more or less the story. Why such subject? I mean, why this? With what it is connected? With what kind of projects this subject is connected? And now moving to the paper itself. So this is the usual presentation outline of the paper. So I will begin with the introduction, with the objective, motivations, and contributions of the paper. And then I will briefly explain the method that I use to compute this inefficiency measures. I will not spend a lot of time talking about method because this paper is empirical paper. So I'm not developing here new models, so that there's no necessity to really explain it in an extensive way. And then the most important part of the paper, which is the empirical part, where I will show you the data sets that I used. And then I will show you the results, and finally I will end up with conclusions. So the objective of the paper is to measure this inefficiency within this input and output specific framework using the method of data envelopment analysis for Polish district courts for this period, 2017-2021. So I'm interested in this paper to see which inputs and outputs are used most efficiently and which are used the least efficiently. Just to have some general overlook of the situation, how it is efficiency in this sector in Poland. And I focus only on 3 types of cases handled by this course. So I focus on 3 sections within this course, which are the main sections, which is the criminal, civil, and family cases. I will explain you later why the focus is only on these 3 sections, because the course can also deal with other cases, such as labor cases and commercial cases. But later on, there will be more details when I will be explaining you about data sets, why this specific choice. And regarding the motivation for the study, besides that I have to accomplish with all these projects that I entered, there is of course more motivation related with literature and the situation in this specific sector. So I studied inefficiency of courts. So it is well known that efficient courts are very important for economic growth, for film competition, entrepreneurship, and financial market development. So they are important, but to achieve efficiency in this sector is not so easy, because this is the example of public sector. No? So in public sector, there is really no output price information, there is really no competition. So efficiency is not so easy to achieve as in the private sector. On the other hand, we are very interested in efficiency of courts of justice, and in particular in the European Union there is this initiative called the European Commission for the Efficiency of Justice, CEDEJ, and here the idea, it has, you can look into it, it has of course the web page, and here the idea is to compare courts in Europe at the aggregated level. I mean, compare justice. We don't have here the data for at the level of courts. We have the aggregated data for each country. So you can see, you can compare, let's say, Poland with Spain on some kind of indicators, some key performance indicators. And here you have, wait, I'm already in front, sorry. And here you have some examples of these indicators that they calculate, which is the clearance rate, which is the ratio of solved cases into incoming cases. There is the disposition time, which is the ratio, the division between 365 days, so the day of the year, divided by the case turnover ratio, which is the solved cases into pending cases. So this is the second indicator they compute, and the third one is also the number of pending cases per 100 inhabitants. So they compute these key performance indicators at the aggregated level. So to differentiate and to add value to this CEDEJ initiative, this paper is, in this paper I am doing the analysis at the court level, so at the court level. So I have a data at the level of courts, not the aggregated data for the country, but at the level of each court. So this is the value added to this CEDEJ initiative. And why studying Polish courts of justice? So Polish courts of justice is quite an interesting case to study this judicial system inefficiency. So here you have some statistics for Polish justice. So in general, when we look at the statistics that I mentioned to you at the previous slide about the clearance rate, disposition time, so for Poland, the statistics, we are close to the European median. So, and also Polish system has a lot of pending cases, but this is like, we could say that this is everywhere in the European Union. The pending cases, the case is not solved, it's a huge problem. The people who, if you were personally entering in some court case, which I really hope you don't, so it's really the pending cases, probably your case will be a pending case for some years in front. So it's really not good to have really the court case if you want to solve something quickly. Some other interesting statistics, World Bank doing business, they calculate so-called the term of enforcing contracts. So they calculate enforcing contracts is calculated based on justice time, the cost of justice, and the quality of justice. So Poland in this indicator ranks as on the 55th place among 190 economic studies. And what is interesting, Polish citizen, average Polish citizen had to wait approximately 685 days to go through a trial. So you could imagine, that's why I told you, if you don't have the experience, of course, it's better not to have it, honestly, because it is really, although in our profession we are quite used to waiting a long time for the result of research, but still, if you have a very personal case, it's a very long procedure. So in Poland, it's 685 days. When you compare it to the average of the OECD high-income countries, we are worse because the average for this OECD high-income countries is 590 days. So we are worse in terms of this. I also compared the statistics to some other, to the specific European countries. So I was thinking, let's see how Polish neighbor is doing, meaning Czech Republic, how other Eastern European country is doing in terms of it. So as you can see, in Czech Republic, the waiting time is a little bit shorter because it's 678 days, but the Czech Republic ranks as a 103rd, at the 103rd position when Poland ranks on the 55th position. So compared to Czech Republic, we could even say that we do a little bit better, at least in terms of enforcing contracts. But when we compare to the real benchmark, which is Germany, you can see that Poland is doing much worse, because Germany is ranked as the 13th place in enforcing contracts, and the waiting time is, average waiting time is less than 500 days. So we could compare that. Well, that somehow Poland is not doing really bad, but also not doing really good. So in terms of justice, so that there is a way to improve, and that's why it is interesting to see exactly how the system, the efficiency of the system. And looking at the previous literature, no? Because literature on the measurement of court efficiency is increasing. There are still not so many papers. You have the summary of these papers in this table, so as you can see, there are not so many of them. But because also of the project that I mentioned to you before, of this cost action, of course, there will be many more papers coming. So when I was looking at all these papers, what for sure I realized that all of these papers, what you can see in the second column of this table, that all of these papers are focusing on the measurement of inefficiency for all inputs and outputs simultaneously. So the usual DEA or DEA models, and when we want to find the model that I used in this paper, there's only one paper that applies a similar model, which is the paper by Silva 2018, which applies a similar model to the one I'm applying in the paper. But the purpose of Silva is a little bit different, no? Because her paper is about the so-called output specific inputs, meaning that there could be a case where in the usual production assumption in the DA is that the output is produced from all inputs, but it's not always the case. Sometimes some output might be produced from only some inputs. And in the courts of justice, this is the case, no? That, for example, we have solved cases, criminal, let's say criminal and civil solved cases. Then as the input, we could have incoming cases, civil and criminal. So clearly, the criminal solved cases are only connected with the criminal incoming cases, not really with the criminal civil cases. So this is the situation of so-called output-specific inputs, about which Silva is talking in a very important subject in this paper. She uses a similar framework, but with a different purpose, not really to assess which inputs or outputs are used more or less efficiently. And this paper of Silva is using also the output-oriented model, while in this paper I am using the input, the orientation of both inputs and outputs. And of course, the Polish context with the recent data in this framework is also new. They are, of course, papers on the Polish justice, but they focus on the measurement of efficiency for all inputs and outputs simultaneously. So this is the motivation from the point of view of the literature. So to summarize the contribution, so the contribution of the paper, this is the empirical contribution. No? So we employ the method of input and output specific inefficiency measurement for the courts of justice. I analyzed the Polish courts of justice with the recent data. As you will see later, I will compare the inefficiency between cases, between years of study, the location of courts, the size of the courts, and finally, I will also assess the robustness of findings, and I will try to apply several methods for the assessment of input and output specificity to see if the results hold. Okay, so moving to the methodology, to the second part of the presentation. So these are the models which exist, no? So that they are taken already from the literature for the assessment of input and output specific inefficiency. So in my main model, before going into the robustness checks, I use the directional slacks-based measure, also called in the literature directional Russell measure. And here's the model. Actually, the model is exactly citing the paper by Ferrer and Grosko. Because in general, how the model is written, there are some slight differences in the literature, depending on the author. But in general, actually, in one of our papers with Juan Aparicio, we have one paper, Aparicio, Kapelko, Malberg, and José Luis Sanz paper from 2017 in Journal Productivity Analysis, where we show that all these models are very similar and they are all founded on the weighted additive measure. So, of course, when you get into details, there will be some slight differences, mostly how the model is defined, but you will realize that these models are very similar and they are all founded on one model. Because originally, for example, the Fukuyama and Weber this kind of model is, of course, is defined a little bit differently. The objective function is based on slacks and directional vector. But as we show in the other paper, all these models are very similar. So this definition goes exactly after Ferrer and Grosko. So I measure here betas and gammas, which represent the degree of technical inefficiency for each input and each output. And in this basic, this main model, I apply as a directional vector the actual values for inputs and outputs, which is the usual directional vector. Then we could say that the most often directional vector used. So I get here this input and output specific measures, and of course, finally, I would like to also obtain this overall measure. And here is the formula that I use for the overall measure. Of course, it's also one of the options that can be applied here to get this overall inefficiency measure. So this is my main model and main results, and then I also ask myself about a little bit about the robustness, if the results hold, changing, applying different model. So as the first attempt at the robustness, what I did in this paper is something really basic, because I applied the same model as this one, but I applied different. Sorry, I'm going in front. I should go to the back. But I applied a different directional vector, and in the second model, I used simply the average values of the input and output variables, which is also the directional vector used quite often, similarly to the actual values of inputs and outputs. So it's the same model, but different directional vector. And then I have also a third model, meaning the second model for the robustness, which is the alternative measure of input and output specific inefficiency, is in the form of multi-directional efficiency analysis. This is the proposal by Bogetov and Hogarth and by Asmild et al., so Dutch scientists. And the idea of this model is to separate the process of benchmark selection from the efficiency measurement. So such models are applied in two steps. So in the first step in this model, what we are doing is to calculate the input and output coordinates of so-called ideal points. So I look for these values of the ideal values of inputs and outputs. Ideal in this context means the maximum potential for the input reduction and maximum achievable increment of output. So I do it separately for inputs. So this is the model for calculating the ideal point for inputs. A similar model, but for outputs. So in these models, I calculate this X star. In this model, I calculate the Y star, so the ideal point for outputs. So this is a first step, and in the second step, I use this ideal points calculated, this X and Y star, in the third model, and the results of this third model is used to compute my input and output inefficiency values using this formula. So I have this solution from the previous model, and I use this solution and my ideal points to calculate the inefficiencies. So again, I have the input and output specific inefficiencies. So again, I want to aggregate them into overall measures. So I use the similar formulas to be compatible with the previous formula. So I use here in the other model, I use the similar formula to have, of course, the results as much comparable as possible. So these are like the third models that I will use in the empirical analysis, and they basically follow the previous literature. So after showing you all this, I can finally show you the empirical part of the paper, which is the most important in this paper. So my data comes from the Ministry of Justice, by the Polish Ministry of Justice. So I obtained this data set, for which I am really grateful, because it's quite unique data set. So this data set, as I already mentioned, is at the level of courts, of each court. What I got from the ministry is the data on the number of cases, different type of cases. You have more or less the summary of the cases that I have the data on. These are incoming, solved, pending, the cases that re-entered in the system, and also the data on the different kind of court workers, such as judges, etc. And I also have the data on the length of court proceedings, and the data is at the level of common courts, so-called common courts, which are the courts of the general jurisdiction. And in Poland, we have three types of common courts. So beginning from we have 11 appeal courts, which are the courts of second instance only. They are located in the largest Polish cities, and then each appeal court has within it the regional courts, which is like the second division, and then each regional court has within district courts, which is the most basic level for courts. And the district courts are deal only with first instance cases, and regional courts are a little bit peculiar because this is a mixture of first instance and second instance cases. So in Poland, the situation is like this, that all basic first instance courts are dealt with in district courts, but more complicated first instance courts and appeals are dealt with in regional courts. So in this study, I focus on the district courts because they are mostly comparable, no? Because between them, because they all deal with first instance courts. So they are in this way they are pretty similar. And in Poland, in 2021, we had 318 courts. The numbers are changing a bit during the years, but at least the period that I have, I will have a balanced pattern. Okay, and then going into more details about data. So district courts, they have different sections. So the most basic section in each court is criminal and civil. So criminal and civil, every district court needs to have criminal and civil. The rest of the sections are optional. So in practice, how is it that all district courts have criminal and civil sections, and the majority of them have also family sections. And only few courts really have labor and social security sections and commercial sections. So in this study, because of this, in this study, I decided to focus only on this, on district courts, but only on 3 types of sections, no? Criminal, civil, and family, to have the sample as large as possible. No? It was also my dilemma how to solve it, but I decided to do it like this, because if I would include labor and social security and commercial cases, the sample size would decrease a lot. I would, instead of having 300 courts, I will end up like with 40 courts. So I was thinking that for the first study, I should try to have the most general, the largest the sample as possible. So I decided to focus on this 3 types of section, and each section is composed of the departments. So basically what I have been doing, I was aggregating to get the number of cases, the number of judges, I was aggregating data over departments. So here you have some examples of departments, the department that are inside each of these sections, the departments which are in criminal, in civil, and family sections. What is also important here that in big courts, usually we can have several departments of each type. So for example, I could, in the big district court, I could have like 3 or even more criminal departments, similarly with civil departments. So that they could be many more departments. But in general, what I did for this study to get the data, I aggregate the data over departments. And they focus only on 3 sections, criminal, civil, and family. So this is finally the data set that I use. So from 318 courts, I end up with 313 courts because of the number of reasons. So I have lost 5 courts because as I mentioned, the majority of course have family sections, but unfortunately out of 318 courts, 2 courts do not have family sections, so I had to remove these 2 courts. Then 2 other courts where there was some lack of data, because also what I mentioned, the number of courts is also changing between years. I wanted to have a balanced panel of data, so I also lost 2 courts because they appeared in 2017, so they didn't have data on pending cases from 2016, so I had to remove. And I also removed, so it's going to be a 5th court that I have to remove, which is, I consider this court as an outlier, because this is a court which is quite an interesting court, but it's a court located in the eastern part of Poland, which is dealing only with electronic cases, and these cases are submitted from the whole Poland. And really, when you are comparing this court with other courts, it turned out that it has like maybe 50 times more cases than the usual court. So it turned out that this court is kind of outlier in this sample that I have been using. So finally, I lost 5 courts. So I have 330 courts for this period 2017-2029. And these are the variables that I use. So for the outputs, I use solved cases, the 3 types of solved cases, criminal, civil, and family. So more or less the literature, we could say that there is a consensus. The literature is not arguing the subject with outputs. More or less all researchers agree that as an output for the courts, solved cases should be used. The bigger discussion is about inputs. Which inputs to use for courts of justice? At the end of this presentation, I will also have a slide about future research and like open question. So it's also something to discuss. So there is no consensus on which inputs should be used in courts of justice. So in this study, after reviewing the literature, I decided to use this set of inputs. So I use a case load for different types of cases. Case load is what courts have in each year, the cases they have to deal with. Meaning the cases that are coming incoming cases of this specific year. So I have the cases, let's say, from 2017. I analyzed the year 2017. So I have the cases from 2017 that came this year, but I also have a pending cases from the previous year, because unfortunately, as I told in the beginning, the courts are suffering from the pending cases. So I will also have the pending cases from 2016. So the court in each year will need to deal with this case load, which are the incoming cases and the pending cases from the previous year. So this is my first input variable divided into three, because I have these three sections: criminal, civil, family. Then I have the court workers, which the main court workers are, of course, judges, and I have also the division into criminal, civil, and family. And there are also, of course, other workers in courts of justice, and each system, of course, is a little bit different in the European countries. How is it in Poland? So in Poland, we have so-called other judicial workers, and among other judicial workers, there are three categories, which are assessors, is almost like a judge. Is practically in practice a previous step to become a judge. And in general, assessors is quite a new feature in Polish system. Then we have assistants. So the assistants, they are preparing cases for judges, helping them somehow. And then we have legal clerks. So legal clerks is like a second way. So we have judges, and then we have legal clerks that are already dealing and making the decision in some of the cases that are also judges deciding on. And I am forced to aggregate those three features, because sometimes there is some kind of lack of data, etc. So I aggregate them, but they are all, I have the division into assessors dealing with criminal, with civil, and with family cases. So these are only those that deal with these three kinds of cases, but they are aggregated. And there is also a feature of other court workers, such as clerks, probation officers, other workers. And that was also my dilemma, if to include them or not, because these workers, they are dealing with all kinds of cases. So they are not only helping to criminal, civil, and family, which is my main focus, but also if they are presented with labor cases, with commercial cases, if they are presented in the court. So that's why I decided not to include them. Of course, there could be always a question if it was really a good approach not to include them. No? Because I was thinking, okay, I focus only on these sections, and those workers deal with also other sections. So somehow I found it not fair to include them if I focus only in a way with a part of the courts. So basically, these are all the variables that I used finally. And finally, the results which I obtained with this data. So the first table shows the results which I was mostly interested in, to see inefficiencies for each input, to see an output, to see where is the largest inefficiency. So this table summarizes the average of inefficiencies for each input and output. I have also the overall inefficiency, this aggregate, this average, which was in fact average of inputs in output specific inefficiencies. And I also make some average across, like the solved average for solved cases, for judges, for cases load. So basically, what I found is that on average, the courts could increase all inputs and outputs by around 12%. But what is probably most interesting, looking into specific variables, is what I found is that most inefficiency is connected with court workers. Actually, the largest inefficiency, so here we have the largest potential for improvement, is for the figure of other workers, these other legal workers in the Polish courts of justice, and then second most inefficient are judges, no? Are judges, and actually among judges, the most inefficiency is found for civil judges, and there is inefficiency for criminal judges. The other input, which is the cases load, present much lower inefficiency, much lower potential for improvement. And when looking at the inefficiency for outputs, we see that these values of inefficiency are really low, no? Especially compared to judges, almost negligible values for inefficiency of outputs. So the largest potential for improvement would be for the efficiency of workers. So either they are working inefficiently, or there is huge potential for decreasing this workforce. Of course, so this is the main result, main story. Of course, we could also ask ourselves if these differences are statistically significant. So I ran also additionally the usual test we run in efficiency analysis, which is the lead test, no CIMA and Zelenic test, and I found that this is the table that is showing the test statistics and significance levels, and it shows that all the results were statistically significant. So we can really conclude that that really at Polish courts of justice, the most inefficient factor are court workers. What else regarding the results? What else I looked into? I had a data observed for 2017-2021, so I could look a little bit at the evolution of inefficiencies. So maybe this graphic is not so perfect to see the differences, but in general, you have to trust me that in 2020 the inefficiency increased a lot. In 2020, meaning the beginning of COVID pandemic in Europe, more or less when we began the lockdown. So really the inefficiency of practically almost all variables increased a lot in 2020, because of course what happened at Polish courts of justice, that in the beginning they were practically closed. Only the really serious and important cases were dealt with, but really the functioning of courts were interrupted until they adapted, no? Because of course, after someone like we at university, until we learned how to teach online, it also took us a little bit of time. Although I think we needed to be quicker, I think, because the classes they were not taking place. No? So of course the courts also adapted, and they started to do the proceedings online in 2020 already. They also introduced double shifts, the working double shifts. But then, as we remember, there was a second also wave of in 2020 itself, during autumn, when again the cases increased, and we had the problem with excessive quarantine. In Poland, I remember that at some point, and in whole Europe, I believe, that there was a problem that everybody will be in quarantine, because when you got COVID, then they were already tracking the people you had met, so then they were also going into isolation. And then at some point there was a problem that finally we will be all in the quarantine and there will be no one working on the market. So the same problem was in courts of justice. So in 2020, basically, even that they adapted to have the proceedings online and they were functioning, but then there was this problem of almost all workers being in quarantine. So basically, that can explain that in 2020 this inefficiency increased, meaning efficiency dropped a lot. In 2021, we could observe with these results a little bit of improvement in some variables, but still some of the variables were further decreasing. The inefficiencies were further decreasing. So it showed a little bit. Of course, there could be also other factors. Now I am explaining this 2020 drop by COVID, but of course there could be also other factors that contributed to this inefficiency decrease, and they need to be, of course, analyzed more deeply in another study. What else I was interested in this paper? We are almost there. I also looked at the court location, because I told you, I explained in the beginning, that in Poland we have 11 jurisdictions. We have this 11 appeal courts related with 11 Polish largest cities. So I was thinking, okay, let's see if there are some differences between district courts depending in which jurisdiction they are. And in fact, there are some differences. Well, there are lots of numbers, but I will try to summarize them. In general, what I found is that the courts located in largest cities, largest Polish cities, they tend to be the most inefficient. They're performing badly, no? So like the courts located, the worst courts were located in Warsaw, followed by actually by my city, Wroclaw, and also Łódź was doing very badly, while the small jurisdiction like Białystok, Rzeszów, Gdańsk, the smaller ones, they were more efficient. What also turns out from this, which I will have the confirmation on the last set of results, is that the courts located in larger cities, they also tend to be large in the size. But later on, in a moment about this is only the statistical significance again, so most of the differences between the inefficiencies in court location are statistically significant, and this is the final set of results. Which confirms the court location, because here I looked at the size, specifically at the size differences. So depending on the number of the departments in each court, I computed the size variable, and I divided my sample into two categories, large courts and small courts. And again, here I found that larger courts tend to be most inefficient, which actually also confirms some of the previous studies. For example, Pejrache and Sago, they found also that large courts in general mean small justice, no? Small justice. So this is also confirmed by this study. And I also look at the correlations between those results, between this, the additional models. Actually, it's not yet the correlations. Correlations, sorry, will be at the other slide. I'm sorry, I'm just going wrong direction. Okay, but I have no. So these are the robustness checks. Before showing you the correlations for robustness checks, so these are the inefficiencies for these additional models. So basically, what I found in these additional models, I found the same conclusion, that the most inefficient factor in Polish courts of justice are court workers. Again, the other court workers or the judges. So this is confirmed. So somehow we can say that that the results are quite robust, and this is the correlations I was mentioning, the correlation between this basic model, the results of my basic model, main model, and this additional models for robustness checks, so the correlation is statistically significant, and they are also rather large. So again, we could confirm that the results are quite robust. Okay, and I'm really running out of time. Okay, so these are the conclusions, no? So the conclusions, so what I analyzed is inefficiency for each input and output variable. What I found is that court workers are the most inefficient variable, so I was thinking about different solutions on how to improve Polish system. So what I was thinking that for sure the Polish system needs the improvement in the case handling system to shorten the proceedings, to make the proceedings shorter and quicker, and finally to have probably the pending cases smaller. So for sure here I think that helpful would be a better IT system. Of course, in Polish courts we have the IT system, but from the point of view of the user of this IT system, I can say that it's really it needs a lot of improvement. It's not clear, really nobody knows what each action means in this system. So if the user doesn't know, then it means that it will improve, it will impact also the process. So for sure the improvement can be here. Then I think that some kind of performance metrics for court workers will be helpful, no? To have the temporal evaluation, no, of the performance on the number of cases, and to connect it with some incentives. Some incentives, if I perform better, to have some kind of bonus, etc. Of course, some measurement frameworks, performance measurement frameworks exist in Polish courts, but they require improvement. And the third advice would be, which is not so easy to to introduce in adjustment in the number of other judicial staff and the number of judges, meaning some kind of allocation. No? So allocation, for example, I was thinking that within the same city where we have many courses, well, probably the judges would not like to listen to my advice, but I think that such system that you can allocate the judges more easily within the same city to the cases, where we have small number of cases, where we have the large number of cases to compensate, would be very helpful, but of course that would require some regulation. No, it's not so easy to introduce a system. Then looking at the inefficiencies of cases, so solved cases, I think there's inefficiencies of solved cases, they are connected with inefficiencies of judges. So this issue is more or less solved. Then looking at the caseload, here I have incoming cases and pending cases. So I think pending cases is again, they are connected, they are a result of inefficiency of judges, but incoming cases, this is connected with the demand for justice. No? So it's also not so easy to adjust incoming cases because this is the demand, the Polish citizen can fill in the case to the court. So the improvement is not so easy, but I think this improvement could be undertaken in some way. So the solution, what I have been thinking is that I think in Poland the situation is that it's too easy to go to the court. What's the situation? Actually, I can go to court. I even don't need a lawyer. The fee is 20 euros, which I think that in nowadays prices 20 euros is nothing. So I can pay 20 euros. I don't need a lawyer. Of course, when it comes to the lawyer, then the price is much more expensive. But in general, if I don't need a lawyer, I can go to this kind of lawyers. We have a lot of this lawyer advices, which is for free, like non-profit advices, and I can write a letter to the court. I can pay 20 euros, and I'm there. So, okay, I don't like my neighbor. And I go, no? Because I have enough of him, and I can even invent something. No? I can even invent something. So of course I don't want to give the incentive for doing that, but this is really possible. So I think that really maybe it's not so nice advice. Well, it's good that the Polish citizen, in general citizen, have an easy access to justice, but on the other hand, we have to prevent so much excessive use of justice. No? If everybody can go because I don't like you, and then you receive the whole process, which costs a lot of money, a lot of time. So then I think this is exaggeration. So for sure, some increment of the prices in these matters would be helpful. Also, which is probably more acceptable advice is to increase the role of mediation. No? Because now the mediation is becoming to be used at Polish courts, but what happens is that you go to court, and then the judge, you are already in the court, and then the judge can tell, okay, you don't agree, let's do the mediation, but you are already in the court. And in other countries, as I was reading, for example, in Germany, to get to the court, it's really the last instance. First, you go through the mediation, you go through all, and then finally is the court. And in Poland, it's the court. Also, I think the cultural shift is necessary, because Polish people, we are looking at the court as the only solution to some kind of conflict. But it's not should be like this. It's, I think, the education for them, that mediation is important, that other ways, and not only the court, here would be helpful. And I think that increasing the prices, I think it's gonna be the mostly efficient, no? Because then the people will think, okay, I don't like my neighbor, but I have to pay 100 euros. Okay, let's forget about this. No? So I think that could be the case. Okay, the increase in efficiencies during COVID. So we are already warned that we will have another pandemic. So it seems that we need to be prepared. Courts also needs to be prepared for this. And the final finding that the larger schools are the most inefficient. So again, changes in allocation of cases here would be helpful, which is of course not easy because it would require the changes of regulation. And finally, there's some future research. So what I'm doing right now with this course, I'm trying to do some economic efficiency analysis, which is not so easy, because of this price information, but we are trying to do something with economic inefficiency analysis. And we will be applying with Libya, which we were talking, one of the methods of Juan, of this frontier machine learning methods in the context of Polish courts. And then there are also kind of dilemmas, which are, I think, in the literature are not solved. How to treat pending cases. I treated pending cases as an input, but it's probably not the best solution. It could be about output. It could be also kind of intermediate input, like this network DEA models. So this is a question, so this is not a solved issue, how to treat pending cases. There is also a question if cases itself, they should be included as the input, because here the motivation is that the cases is a demand of justice. So this is really not something that you could have a control on, that the courts could have a control on. So there is also the discussion, some researchers think that cases should not be included as the input at all, only judges and only the workers. So this is also the dilemma that we could try to answer. And of course, what we need to do in this context is really to do the comparative analysis, to compare the courts between European countries, which is not easy because, of course, the data is not so much comparable, but I think that we should do the effort to, I was discussing with one Spanish researcher, with Pablo Arocena, about Spanish courts, and actually, which was surprising, that Portuguese and Spanish courts, they were really not so much comparable, but Spanish and Polish, we could see some links, how the inputs and the functioning is doing. So there is some hope to do in the future some comparative analysis for Spain and Poland. So, okay, sorry for taking so much time, and thank you very much for your attention. And now if you have questions, I will be happy to answer. If you have some suggestions, of course, I will be very happy to listen to your suggestions, comments. Thank you.
¿Nos da tiempo a alguna preguntita? ¿Alguna pregunta? Ya más de cara al futuro, igual has dicho algo de eso, no sé. Sí. ¿Has valorado también en introducir alguna variable estilo tiempos de resolución del caso o eso?
Todavía no. Sí.
Podría ser interesante, ¿no? Porque es una de las medidas que en el fondo también...
Y eso sería como calidad un poquito. Bueno, sí. De verdad, Lidia, lo quise hablar contigo, porque sí que yo tengo una variable que me han dado, creo que no es para todos los courts, but I have this variable, tengo la variable de length, que es la duración del caso. Pues entonces, se podría introducir, pero como input o como output.
Tendríamos que verlo,
Pues eso es para discutir todavía, ¿no?
Sí.
Porque sí que esta variable...
Estaba ahí, lo que pasa es que no la había...
Sí, está... Sí. Pero yo no estoy segura si esto es para todos estos juzgados, si es solamente para algunos, pero bueno, hay que verlo y cómo incluirlo, ¿no?
Incluirlo,
como input o como output. Pero esto también sería algo original porque, bueno, todos los estudios lo que tienen es casos y los trabajadores, ¿no? Y en general...
Y esta variable también te mide el tiempo que tarda en resolverse el caso y creo que podría ser interesante.
Sí.
Vale.
Pues ya sabemos que incluir en el texto que nos toca, ¿no? Que está aquí, bueno, sin poner nombres, ¿no? Pero está en el Future Research, ¿no?
Muy bien. Sí. ¿Alguna pregunta?
Sí, yo creo.
Sí.
Según tu experiencia, ¿el tamaño de la empresa influye negativamente en la eficiencia?
En este caso influye negativamente.
En general, cuando...
Depende, yo creo. Hay de todo de los resultados. Hay motivación que influye positivamente y hay también argumentos que cuando eres muy grande es más difícil tomar decisiones, por eso la eficiencia va. Yo creo que hay ambos, que no hay consenso. Y aquí sabe que los más grandes son menos. Sí.
Gracias.
Gracias, Magda.
A vosotros por estar aquí, gracias.